Welcome to DC Direct. I'm Lionel Donovan. Here we'll be breaking down some key political issues surrounding this year's midterm elections. But we want you to weigh in, so feel free to reach out to us on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook at Ch.3 World and be a part of the conversation. In today's show, we'll be talking about the immigrant community and what matters to them when they head to the polls. It's almost Election Day, and that means people around the country are getting ready to head to the polls. But for some, this will be the first time that they'll be exercising their political rights as new Americans. Every year, hundreds of thousands of people from around the world go through the process to become new citizens. And with their newly earned status, these voters are also looking to have their voices heard. But can a community made up of people from around the globe really make a difference in an election? Donald Trump and many others in the Republican Party are relying on immigration to boost turnout in the upcoming midterm elections. But it may have an effect that they didn't intend, an increase in immigrant voters. Let's take a closer look. The total number of foreign-born naturalized citizens in the U.S. makes up about 7.8% of the U.S.'s total electorate. But that small percentage can still make a difference in tight races. In the last presidential election, only 54% of naturalized U.S. citizens voted. That's slightly lower than the national turnout overall. This year is a midterm election, meaning turnout across the board will likely be lower than 2016 because there's no presidential candidate on the ballot. So are the stakes high enough for immigrant voters to turn out in larger numbers? To find out, we sat down with Mohammed Gula of Engage, an organization dedicated to helping Muslim Americans and other naturalized immigrants get the resources and education they need to make informed decisions at the ballot box. As the son of Libyan immigrants, Gula understands the disconnect many immigrants have with getting involved with politics.
Definition of civic engagement pre-2016 was more so about interfaith work, was about feeding the poor, it was about ensuring that folks felt safe and secure in that sense. Civic engagement was never really looked at as something that, we had to be politically involved. But I think that also, that culture shock and that change post-2016 has really pushed individuals to really recognize what's on the line. So I think that there are a lot of things that have been kind of put in the forefront that impact immigrants directly, and I think that kind of put a fire under them to kind of get out, not just vote, but to knock on doors, to make calls, and even to run for office.
Gula also highlights the need to educate new voters in his community because he knows all too well that it's a right many people in the world don't have.
Have to understand is that as Americans, we do take the voting process and voting in general for granted because we became so comfortable with being comfortable. and the reality of it is that it's a priority that we should all put in the forefront and not take voting for granted. We know that our ancestors never did, and we know that people would die for just the right to vote and be heard, and we see that across the world.
While some focus on education, others have taken to activism to get people involved in the political process. Sarah Moore, an activist who champions immigrant rights, reminds people that while voting is important, there are other ways to be engaged and speak out, because every action leads to bigger action.
I think like everything else, what's helped is I've always used my platform since I obtained it to urge people to do something that is bigger than them. So I don't think voting is the answer to solving all problems, because there's work that has had to be done to even lead to certain candidates sitting in the places that they're trying to sit in, or that they are sitting in, elected officials we have now. But I think I'm using every single bit of strength, every bit of my platform, every way of access, of impact that I have to tell people to vote. I urge that because I can't vote. So it's not like, I'm not empowered, do it for me. It's more, I'm empowered. I literally need your help to help empower other people like myself who are creating change in the country that we call home.
Whether it's voting or activism, the goal is to get a seat at the table. And many children of immigrants are now working to make that happen. One of those people is Mohammed Saifuldin, who's running for city council in Northern Virginia. Saifuldin's story is familiar to many who come to the States looking for a better life.
So I'm originally from Sudan. I came to the U.S. roughly about 20 years ago as a refugee. And actually, when I came here, I didn't speak English. So I was a product of public schools who came here escaping instability, war, and drought. So America was the beacon of hope for us.
How important was being involved in politics to you and your family growing up?
First of all, I'm coming from a place where democracy doesn't live. You know, you're coming from a place where you're ruled by dictatorship. So the concept is foreign to you. You're not aware of it, and no one is taking the time to reach out to you. And you're too busy trying to make ends meet. So it's not something that you factor in. In fact, I didn't become involved politically until I was in college, which is a bit late in my view. Had I known about earlier, would have been very helpful, because we are voting for people who are supposed to represent us and our interests, but they don't necessarily do that. So they're just relying on our vote. This seat was once held by George Washington, the first president of the United States. And then fast forward a few hundred years later, that a descendant of an immigrant and a Muslim could occupy that same seat, brings us back that there is hope and that we will pass this silly and insane political climate that we're going through. So I'm hopeful, and I want everyone to be hopeful as well.
Getting involved in politics can be an intimidating process for someone settling into a new country. There's a lot of new information to understand, and going through all that information can be quite a challenge. But as more people look to call the U.S. home, it seems as though many people are willing to take that challenge on. Well, that's all the time we have for today in DC Direct. But please be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at TRT World, and be a part of the conversation and let us know what you think. Until next time, I'm Lionel Donovan.